Thank you. Let's start with the minutes. Did anybody have any comments on, there were some comments that I believe have been incorporated into the most recent version. Did anybody have any comments on those?
She
No.
did something special with Vanna, right? Yeah.
I didn't hear that question. Hi, George. All right, if nobody, will somebody make a motion to approve the minutes? Second? I think that was Ken. Marilyn,
I'm abstaining because I wasn't at the June meeting.
okay. Tom,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Lily,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Sandy,
Yes.
Derek,
Yes.
Zaina,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Great. So our first item tonight, we have quite a lot of stuff on this agenda, some meaty topics. First of which is an update on the comp plan by Jake Collins. And why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Anne and the rest of EDAB. My name is Jake Collins. As I mentioned earlier, I've been with the town for just about 4 years now. The first 2 years were spent as a preservation planner in the planning department. And then as the comprehensive plan was beginning to kick off, I switched teams and now I am the community planner in the department's housing and community development division. In addition to my comprehensive planning hat, I also wear a CDBG and home hat. So, it's kind of, I work at the intersection of those topics, which has been really fulfilling. As for background, I have a master's in science and historic preservation from the University of Vermont. And I actually just passed my AICP exam several months ago. So, fully on the
Congratulations.
at this point. Thank you. And so to kick us off, I am going to share my screen. And I hope this will be a brief update for people like Al and Anne who attended last week's meeting. It will be material you've probably already heard and already digested. But for the rest of you, I hope it will be helpful. Okay, great. Oh, I am in the wrong deck. Here we are. Apologies. Great. Okay. So as a reminder, the comprehensive plan is Brookline's 15-year roadmap for the town's future, and it's particularly focused on making land use decisions. So what do we want to see more of? What do we want to see less of? How do we ensure that the town is thriving in 2040? And of course, it'll impact regulatory changes. Those are not part of the plan. I always like to say that up front. Any changes that do require town meeting approval will have to be submitted and go before a town meeting for a formal vote. Policies for the physical environment, investment. Of course, we have the town's CIP. This will, of course, help aid decision makers in where prioritizing limited funding. And then ongoing community discussions. We do not see this document going on a shelf after it is complete. We want to continue these discussions through implementation and beyond. For those of you who have been following the process, we are kind of sort of wrapping up the topic-based recommendations, and I will get to that in a second. But we really want to go out and hear from you all, not only as experts in your respective fields, but also as Brookline residents before making any concrete decisions. So over the past 6 months or so, we've wrapped up the visioning statements. We've come up with some draft vision statements that we will bring to the community in the fall, as well as identified some topics and themes for AKA chapters and subheadings in the chapter for the final plan document. In the fall, we'll begin discussing planning for implementation. And this timeline is a little bit dated now. We expect to be done in Q1 of 2026, but we think it'll extend past our January deadline. So one thing that I'd like to highlight is the current path. So this is what the town could look like without any external intervention. And so this data was all pulled together by RKG and Agency Landscape and Planning, our consultant team. So they anticipate 3,000 new residents, 1,600 net new housing units, and 510 net new jobs. And those are particularly people, they think that they will be in healthcare, in real estate, and professional and technical services mostly, with some food work thrown in there, food service work. Development, and it will likely be around Harvard Street and the Chestnut Hill. And then we may see some smaller development throughout town. And so that's kind of a cross section of what our town looks like now. And this will be helpful to keep in memory for when I show you the economic development based path. Okay, so future paths. The point of them are to test the impacts of different population and housing trajectories and also policy changes. So we're hoping to explore how to achieve greater fiscal balance through commercial property tax growth. That kind of flows through all of our future paths, even though there is one devoted to like ramping up the growth, the commercial growth. And then explore where growth, I would say both commercial and residential growth is possible and where it's desirable. And as I mentioned earlier, here are the steering committee's themes and topics. Thriving commercial areas was actually one of the themes that we were able to get consensus on pretty early in the process. And then the topics or the subheadings are expanding commercial activities and reaching each commercial center identity and equitable employment. So there were three paths that Agency and RKG kind of walked us through at last week's meeting. Complete neighborhood, which is focusing a lot on housing and upping housing and making sure people can age in place, that people can find apartments as soon as they leave college or while they're in grad school. Healthy economy is primarily focused on growing the town's economic base. And then sustainability is really kind of focusing on best practices in climate action to ensure that Brookline is standing in 2040. And this is not to say we have to choose one and go with run with that one. We will be taking aspects that we like or deem desirable from each and kind of molding it to fit what the town wants to see. So the future paths, they test different population and job prospect or job protections. So as you can see, employment is in this third category. The current path has us adding 510 jobs, as does complete neighborhoods. We kind of bumped that up for the latter two scenarios though. So healthy economy, you see we have a higher job growth, but we have relatively steady housing growth. And then sustainability, we also move that up a tad. We add an extra 1,000 to the people to the population, add an additional 300 housing units, and then keep that 1,200. So that's kind of like the ramped up version of all of them. And then here is just kind of a brief comparison of the three. Each has their own merits. It's likely we will pick and choose aspects from each of them. So of course, I want to focus on the healthy economy, which expands job growth and commercial activity. It also supports the town's business district. So some of the key changes are strengthening existing retail and economic centers. It was interesting. I actually, I believe I actually ran into Lily at the Coolidge Corner Library, but last week I was out at all the libraries collecting input from residents and visitors, and everyone was saying how Coolidge Corner is their favorite place in Brookline, and how they'd like to replicate it elsewhere or expand it. They had all these great ideas. So that's something that may fall under this future path. And then of course, housing near commercial centers to support local retail, kind of the bodega system. And then, of course, it falls into other categories, you know, community well-being and mobility and access. And so here's kind of a cross-section of what Brookline could look like if we proceed with the healthy economy future path. So, you know, it's a little bit taller, there's some placemaking, up the density a little bit. You know, it might not be to everyone's taste, but to some people, this will certainly resonate with them. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we will, the thriving commercial areas is really where this future path is nested. So it's reinforcing existing commercial districts, expanding neighborhood style commercial nodes, and then considering adding hospitality uses to Brookline institutions. So these are just potential strategies. You know, clearly they're not fully fleshed out, but if there is broad support for it, you know, they're a great jumping off point. And then identity is a big thing, so a lot of placemaking, and then targeting new businesses, whether it be through zoning or incentivizing small businesses. You know, there are a myriad of ways we could go with that. And then equitable employment, you know, diversify retail offerings, make sure that everyone has a store that caters to them, and then emphasizing family-oriented or affordable commercial establishments near multifamily developments, good for the business owner, good for the resident. And then you can see they have, agency and RKG have placed a few tags near particular spaces in town where we may consider adding either new buildings or redoing the zoning to allow for greater uses. And once again, this kind of just focuses on the placemaking. You know, that's important to ensure the viability of these districts. Everyone was saying that Village Corner was great, as I mentioned, but the one thing they wanted was more open seating, more spaces to connect and congregate that don't require, you know, a purchase of any sort. And so this would kind of fall under your purview, and also the Economic Development Long-Term Planning Division. So, you know, keep this in mind if this is something that you're interested in. And then, you know, just some transportation strategies to ensure that we can execute our plan, you know, reduce driving, and improve walking and biking. So a lot of people have been wondering about the fiscal impacts of these plans. So the key model assumptions include everything from town tax rates to student generation rates and development scenarios. This was completed by RKG, has their stamp of approval. And as you can see here, the healthy economy and sustainability future paths have greater positive impact than the complete neighborhoods. So I thought I would leave you with that. All of this information, this is just an excerpt from a larger presentation from last week's steering committee meeting, is posted on the steering committee's webpage. I will also send it to economic development staff to forward to you for those of you who really want to dig in deep and see the different scenarios. Next steps, as I mentioned, we are going to have a fall public workshop. You know, we're hoping for a large scale engagement push online, in person, to kind of, you know, ensure that we hear from the public and get at exactly what they want to see in the town. You know, of course, we have to take everything in concert with the experts' opinions to ensure that, you know, we're thriving and viable well into the future. But so far, it has been really, really helpful and really helped us orient ourselves going out to the public and returning with these with this data. So we will come back to you with the draft vision statements and then the current and future paths. What will come of that will be a preferred growth change map, so likely different pieces of each scenario, and a finalized vision statement, which will act as a thesis statement for the plan. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Jake. I see Derek has his hand up for starters.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
I can, Derek.
Great. Jake, thank you for the presentation. It's very, very intriguing. It's for me, I've got more questions and answers right now, but I appreciate the different scenario focus, which I think I understand generally. The healthy economy obviously has a economic development centric focus, whereas the housing less so. And then it seems like the sustainable solution is a little bit of a midpoint. But I wanted to just go back to the financial slide, just so I can understand the delta. I'm struggling mightily to understand the delta. It seemed like the healthy economy slide or that one doesn't seem to generate as much revenue compared to the healthy neighborhood. Is that a true statement? I just want to understand. There's the two blue ones, then the current trend, and then you got the complete neighborhood growth. Is that the scenario that we're talking about? That's
So
neighborhood centric or housing centric?
Yes, so the complete neighborhoods trend is the same as the baseline. And then the complete neighborhoods growth was kind of an offshoot of that. And for that, they just bumped up the housing component ever so slightly. So yes, that is.
So I guess, Jake, what I'm trying to understand is if it's largely focused on housing growth, is the total revenue based on just property taxes primarily, less so on the business tax?
That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
understood. Thank you. I see. So if understood correctly, you're still doing better on the healthy neighborhood path
Then we
as
are.
opposed to the economy focused one. Got it. Okay, just wanted to understand that how we thought through that logic. And sustainability is largely has the same economic and staffing trend line in the healthy economy, if I understood it correctly.
Correct, yes.
Okay, got it.
So 2.8 more million after everything's built out, and then versus 2.5 for healthy economy.
I see.
Okay, is that it, Derek? Did you have?
Yeah, I'm just trying to
Yeah,
get sink my teeth into it. I'm good for now. Thank you.
yeah,
And there
okay,
will be more fiscal analysis as the plan progresses. This is just kind of the first pass at it.
okay, thanks. Mark?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. A lot of really helpful information. Just a couple items, food for thought. One was, I had the benefit of speaking with a planner actually from Berkeley, California. And one thing that they incorporated into the other plans was, it was external shocks, right? Specifically, an ecological disaster, a big drought, right? What do we do? Resiliency. There's also authoritarian government takes over and shuts down all funding, right? And so it was just sort of interesting how they sort of started to incorporate that, like it's contingency planning almost, like either just the money spigot just shuts down totally, or just there's a environmental disaster. So just something to think about. It was just sort of interesting that Berkeley, California starting to think that way, just kind of given they have the fires and they also have the, again, they're being picked on as long as a lot of other states about just money. That's number one. Number two, transportation. What's sort of interesting, and you had walking, bike, and car. We've all seen just an explosion of other smaller, affordable transit, i.e. scooters and, the stand-up scooters and the stand-up skateboards and the stand-up, all that sort of stuff, right? So I don't know if is that all for bike paths, but just to make sure we allow for all the different forms of transit, like, because, trains and buses maybe have, reached their cap of their endpoint, but what about all the other stuff out there too? So just a couple items, food for thought.
Thanks, Mark. Jake, can you take the
Oh,
presentation?
I'm so sorry. Yes.
No, that's okay. Just easier to see people. Marilyn.
I have a question and an observation, and my question is following up a little bit on Derek's questions about the numbers on the slide, the fiscal slide. So would you mind just putting that up one more time? Sorry about that.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm also trying to understand how the numbers fit together. And so I apologize if I'm getting this a little bit more slowly than other folks might be. But can we just go through the first column and the second column? The first column, that's total revenue for that sort of development pattern that is that option. Is
Yes,
that right?
yes, so it's
Total revenue, but without cost, because that's the
Correct.
second column. So there's a revenue developed for the neighborhood growth scenario, for the what's described here as healthy economy, and what's described as a sustainability path. That's revenue, and Derek already helped us clarify that it's property tax, not other kinds of revenue, correct? Property taxes from these scenarios, from which you have to net out what are the cost impacts in terms of town services of these scenarios. So the delta that's not really called out here anywhere, but the delta that's interesting, I think, is you ultimately have net revenue. You subtract the total cost from the total revenue in a particular scenario. Is that correct?
correct, yes.
Okay, so you have about 4 million net revenue after cost for the neighborhood scenario. You have close to 5 million net revenue for the healthy economy scenario. And you have about 4 million net revenue for the sustainability scenario. That gives me a different conclusion from your net fiscal impact column here. That you have a net fiscal impact that's comparing the particular scenario to that particular scenario without growth. And I think we usually, at least the way we usually think about this is we have a development scenario, and then you account for the cost from that scenario. You're not accounting for all the revenue, but you account for the cost in a kind of guesstimate way, because we know this is a very hard analysis to do. For any of these scenarios, it's a very hard analysis to do. And then you have a net revenue scenario. And one way of looking at these are, I have to think these are probably just guesstimates all along in the first two columns. But one way of looking at that is really the healthy economy scenario gives you more net revenue than the other scenarios once you net out the cost. Am I wrong about that?
I think you are correct based on my understanding of what you said. Yes.
Yeah. So I would do a different third column here to express what I'm expressing right now. Now, let me make the one observation that I have about this. The healthy economy scenario, besides only accounting for property tax revenue for the scenario, the healthy economy scenario that was sketched out in your previous slides was really focused on commercial areas and retail. We think of non-residential development opportunities and commercial development opportunities that we want to look at in town as going potentially beyond retail and retail related, and potentially beyond the existing commercial center nodes. That is, there are some larger parcels. I mean, Chestnut Hill West is the current example that is on the top of all of our minds. But there are larger parcels, larger areas that present different opportunities than just enhancing an existing commercial area. And there are, even within commercial corridors like Harvard Street, there are larger parcels that could be assembled that would suggest a different slate of opportunities potentially for commercial, mixed-use, non-residential development. Am I inferring that really this other larger kind of development prospect was not analyzed and was not included in that healthy economy scenario?
No, it actually was. So we've analyzed everything from like level 2 lab space to the large parcels in town. So I can send out the full deck, which does kind of deal with some sites that the consultant team has identified as potential for redevelopment. So those, of course, include like the Stop and Shop site and the T-Target. So yes, every use is being considered. The deck I presented did largely focus on retail though.
But Jake, just for clarification, I
Yeah.
think what Marilyn is trying to get at is that the scenarios that were modeled as part of this comp plan, and identifying future pathways work didn't take, for example, an analysis of like City Realty's most recent iteration as the basis of the fiscal impact for Chestnut Hill. So they're kind of on parallel paths in terms of our Chestnut Hill fiscal impact analysis work that we're going to be really diving into as we refine the zoning, and the comp planning process, which is really just developing like a menu of potential scenarios that
Yeah.
we're mixing and matching. Okay, is that what you were asking, Marilyn?
Well, that's certainly related to what I was asking. I wasn't necessarily expecting specific fiscal impact, estimates for Chestnut Hill Realty to be part of the comp plan, but I was wondering the other kinds of commercial development that we might look at in the future.
Marilyn, there's something wrong with your audio all of a sudden.
Huh?
Now it's on.
That's better.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. I guess it's a difference between, certainly I wasn't expecting specific commercial development revenue for the Chestnut Hill West development to be tracked in this analysis. I know that it's much more conceptual and it's much more just looking at a whole range of conceptual possibilities for the next 15 years. But I was asking whether the various categories of other development besides classic commercial area, retail, and related to retail were included in the analysis. And certainly Chestnut Hill West is an example of such a set of potential use opportunities, for example. And things like hotel and lab and other things, that institutional development that we could envision as being part of the growth. And I think Jake's answer is yes, those are included.
That's correct.
Correct? Okay, just not reflected in the slide deck.
Thanks, Marilyn. Sandy.
So let's make sure my audio on. So my question is really kind of, it kind of goes with Mark's question of like the shocks to the system, right? I hear a lot of other communities talking about what happens if they're not creating space for a variety of ages to live in their community, right? And Brookline has an aging community and a lot of people in homes in Brookline that are, kind of aren't moving out and are essentially overhoused, if you will. So I'm wondering how that question has been addressed within the context of this comprehensive, planning effort, because it really is a driver, right? There's a true economic impact that ripples through Brookline's economy if we're not supporting kind of the turnover of those homes in some way. And so while we talked about, and to me, I was digging into the deck to look at, what was the definition of sustainability. And while we talk about sustainability as being green, right, and that's kind of the nature, there also is a community sustainability perspective for the community to function, right, and continue to grow and evolve over time. So I'm curious how that question was layered in here.
Yes, I know that's a great question, and it's a topic we've actually spent quite a bit of time discussing during our comprehensive plan steering committee meetings. So under the housing chapter, we have a subtopic that's called housing across all life stages. So that's everyone, as I mentioned, from the BU undergrad who's moving out on their own for the first time out of the dorms, to the postdoc or the fellow, to those who wish to age in place. And so that is something that we're going to try to kind of imbue with into the entire plan. It's something that's very much top of mind. I imagine that the zoning strategies will kind of lead us there. One of them is, of course, ADUs. The state now mandates it, but it will likely play a role in our comprehensive plan as well. As for this, your second point on kind of neighborhood sustainability, I really like the way you phrased that. And I think that kind of fits into one of the other chapters we have, which is called community well-being. We want to make sure that everyone is cared for and has everything required to meet the most basic needs and more.
And I would just add, Jake, like speaking to the economic impact, right, using my EDAB lens here, there is an economic impact to us not having that variety of life stages within our community. So making sure that that comment is incorporated into these discussions. It's not just the, kind of the loss of the people, which is really critical, but, if you don't have young families, we then have an economic impact to our school system. If we don't have older folks, we have an economic impact to some of the healthcare potentially. If we don't have that middle of life, you have an economic impact of people shopping and whatnot, right? Just being very general, right? But all of those things contribute to the vitality of our commercial districts. And so it is critical, right? That's why EDAB cares about housing so much, because the vitality of our commercial districts is dependent on a vibrant diversity of housing. So thank you for the opportunity and great work. Like, this is a very interesting overview, and I've been digging into the broader pieces, and I think it's very well done. So thank you.
Thank you for that comment.
Al.
So I have three quick observations. The first is that I very much agree with what Sandy just said. And the second thing is on the discussion about the fiscal impact slide and what it means. I think, Jake, maybe rather than replacing the last column with the alternative last column, I think both of those would be helpful to have on the slide. The sort of raw net fiscal impact of each scenario in its own terms, and then the column that you have there, the net fiscal impact relative to the trend, the business as usual path. And my last observation, if you'll forgive me, as a member of the committee, I just want to give a tip of the cap to Jake for the great job he's doing staffing this. There are 16 of us in that committee with 97 opinions. And a consulting team doing some very sophisticated stuff. And the staff role is really critical, and we've been very well served by Mr. Collins.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Ken, and then Derek.
So I'd like to go back to the fiscal impact projections as well. I'm on the Citizen Community Advisory Group for the Chestnut Hill commercial area, and we've had RKG present some initial findings on their fiscal impact. And do you know if they're using the same methodology and basic assumptions for that analysis that they're using for the modeling of the comp plan scenarios?
I believe so, but that's certainly something I would have to look into before confirming.
One of my concerns is that I think they're really overestimating the incremental municipal costs associated with new development. I think the driver for that has always been school age children ratios. And I had heard a statistic, I don't know the specifics, but that the public schools of Brookline now have a capacity, unused capacity of something like 1,500 seats. So whatever our assumptions were, sort of pre-COVID and other things, I think those need to be looked at very carefully. But the other thing I didn't understand about your chart is how is sustainability generating so much more revenue than healthy economy scenario?
Yeah, so that really go back up to the comparison chart.
Ken, you stole my thunder. I had the same question on the sustainability strategy here.
Yeah. So in addition to kind of pushing it up to 1,200 new jobs, it also kind of bumps up the housing units around transit stops and also the population. So taking all that into consideration, they think it will net, I think it's $300,000 more than the healthy economy scenario.
Okay. Do you know how this last question, because we've been involved, this committee and others have been involved with looking at and seeing multiple plans over the past few years, and that includes the housing production plan that Judy Barrett's group put together not so long ago. Do you know how the unit projections, the housing unit projections under your different scenarios compared to what her consulting report indicated?
I don't recall at this time. I will say that the consultant team did have access to that report, and these inputs are based on like prolonged discussion by the steering committee. So these are the inputs that they wanted to see go in for, you know, moderate to high growth scenarios.
Can I just make a quick editorial comment?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think the town should see a more transparent analysis of the fiscal impacts of these different scenarios. I think there's too much black box going on here. And I, for one, would like to see that more open, and so we can debate that, and got a lot of people who are well versed in the schools and other things that drive the cost side, and then get the assessor more fully integrated in this process as well. Thank you.
I would like to note that before RKG went on developing these models, Kara Bruton and I did meet with a few different departments, including the school department, to discuss capacity. And while I don't think the number is 1,500, I think it's up there. So that was certainly something that was taken into consideration by both RKG and agency when modeling these future paths.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
And just one last
Yeah.
thought here for Jake. I'm still trying to get my head around sustainability. That chart suggests that, or going back to the numbers, it seemed like sustainability as a pathway was always middle of the pack, right? I mean, the only thing where I think we did get parity was it had the same amount of employment, but the population was right in the middle. So when I look at 4.6 million as the overall plus side, which makes it the most regenerative or the most positive of all the scenarios, is there some sort of subsidy or some sort of I don't know if it's a early regime or early administration mindset that we haven't completely thought through in terms of all the variables? I'm just trying to understand what is it that is generating so much more. I mean, it seems like from a wellness point of view, I see a lot of cost. I'm just wondering if there's actually some previous subsidies or some sort of funding that was built into the calculus here. The math isn't working for me, but I don't have enough context to opine. So Jake, any guidance would be helpful here.
No, those are excellent questions. If you would send that to me in an email,
Yep.
I can certainly coordinate with RKG and
Yep. Absolutely.
bring it back to EDAB.
Absolutely. No, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, if that's it, thank you so much, Jack. This was terrific. Great work. And I mean, Al is obviously on the committee, but if there's any other input you want from us or well, keep us posted.
Will do. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thanks, Jake. Okay, we have 4 extra minutes here. The next thing we were going to talk about is this is what we said we were going to get started on at our meeting in June, the business impact rubric that the staff has started to develop, and we need to find some people to work on it. Are you going to talk about that, Jess?
Yes, that'll be me. I have a brief slide deck that I'm going to share, just to talk about what we're looking to do here, and just kind of remind everybody, since we had a month off, of what it is we were talking about. You guys see that okay?
Yeah.
All right, so as I mentioned, we talked about doing a business impact rubric to determine which of the warrant articles we should be prioritizing for public hearings every town meeting cycle. So for some background, at the June meeting, we talked about the anticipated impacts for the proposed business related warrant articles. It's not clear how it's being communicated to the local businesses and key decision makers throughout town meeting and throughout the process. Tonight, we also have the ability for the first time to see something in advance of going to town meetings. This is a good stepping stone and a good double header in terms of discussion tonight. We want to make sure that the local businesses know about the warrant articles that impact them, preferably in advance, to provide sufficient time for the feasibility assessment, feedback, and revisions to the warrant article to make it more feasible for the businesses and as well as the town overall. And businesses were not adequately represented at town meeting this past cycle due to time constraints and the demands of operating their business. And in prior conversations from June, the SBDC and the CCMA have both discussed the need for a more proactive and clear-cut way of communicating the implications to the businesses in advance. So this isn't something that's new to just us. This is something that the business community has had concern about for some time. Relevant warrant articles and town meeting actions. The reason we talked about this last month is because of the fog law ban, which did pass this past town meeting. This town meeting, we also had to skip the stuff in the plastic bags. That was a little bit less contentious because a lot of the business community had already been doing that to begin with, but there was still concern about the impact on the small businesses versus grocery stores that were exempt from this kind of thing. The signage zoning bylaw update, which did come from the planning department, which did not pass this past fall town meeting. The circus ban from fall of 2023, which did pass, and the tobacco ban in fall of 2020, which had passed. So our recommendation as staff is to develop a business impact assessment rubric that EDAB and other boards, commissions, and town meeting can use to evaluate the warrant articles to figure out which ones are business related and worth coming and holding public hearings for and potentially taking a position on. And this can go for SBDC as well. Other considerations to consider is that the rubric would not prevent warrant articles with business impacts from being filed, but it will be a way to determine which ones we need to be pulling and bringing to the attention of the businesses and to schedule that public hearing for EDAB and SBDC to take the position. And this would not be for this coming town meeting. There's just not enough time with the warrant closing later this month. The earliest potential town meeting cycle that we would be able to utilize this would be spring or fall of next year. And that's just to give us time to develop it, figure out how we're going to utilize it, and really be able to deep dive into this process. And the opportunity to promote the business rubric as a resource to select board, other boards and commissions, and potentially town meeting members as well. So we'll start with us and bring it forward as we find that it works well. For next step, we're looking to form a working group with 2 or 3 EDAB members that will provide the project updates at monthly EDAB meetings like we do already with the open space plan and the comp plan. And then over the next several months, the working group will work with us as staff and potentially other committees like SBDC specifically to determine the scope and format of the business impact assessment tool. And that.
So before we start a discussion, does anybody have any questions? Marilyn?
Well, I think my thoughts are really more in the nature of discussion and comment. So
that's fine.
I could hold that.
Does anybody have any questions? No. So go on, Marilyn.
Well, I think this is a tremendously useful initiative. I thank the staff for thinking about how we could make progress on these issues of allowing the business concerns to more proactively interact with warrant articles and allowing EDAB to play a more constructive role with respect really to looking at warrant articles and helping bring parties together to do so. And I think I think your suggestion that you developed of some type of rubric is a really excellent thought exercise. I guess my 2 observations are first that I think I'd like to see this broaden from business impact to commercial area vitality. I mean, obviously the examples that you gave, there were potential business impacts, businesses had concerns about them. We want to make it possible for the business constituencies to effectively participate in the process. But I think the town's stake in this is more than just, are the businesses feeling comfortable? I think the town's stake is, we all say many times a year, we say, having vital commercial areas, vibrant, pedestrian-oriented, active, you know, wonderful public realm spaces, areas where, you know, diverse parts of the town can come together. That's kind of integral to the Brookline experience. It's enhancing those commercial areas is very integral to the EDAB mission. And so it's more than just, you know, can the businesses live with this, or are the businesses happy about it? It's really, how does the whole ecosystem, you know, there are some things only affect certain specific business operations, but some things potentially affect the whole business and economic ecosystem of the commercial areas. And so I guess I just encourage us to think, to try to frame this more in that way, in that slightly broader way, to include business interests, but along with the other commercial vitality for the town as a whole interests. And then I guess the other thing, this is much more procedural, but I would hope that having had this great insight, that we could implement it quickly, certainly in time for the spring town meeting. I'm not sure, you know, I'm totally in favor of folks who are interested in this, helping the staff do this. I understand you want to use EDAB's board meeting time efficiently, and having a working group take a look at this is a good idea, I think. But I don't know that it should need multiple meetings of a working group and multiple reports of a working group. I would love to see this move more quickly, and folks who are interested help organize with the staff, you know, some thoughts about this, and come back to the board, and let's do it in time so that something could be aired with the other groups like the Small Business Development Committee, and be ready for the spring warrant if we could.
Thanks, Marilyn. That's, I think we should be able to do that. Does anybody else have any ideas, thoughts? No?
Hi, Anne. It's Zaina here. Just wanted to quickly jump in. It
Yeah.
seems like no matter how much you communicate on all that's happening, it's impossible to fully tell the story to every party that's impacted by what's going on. And I'm just kind of curious, to what extent can this communication be effective and efficient? I mean, similar to what Marilyn was saying, so that it's out there, but someone is also checking it. Because what I think we face in all public discourse is, you know, the constant theme of, but nobody told me, no one informed me. But at some point, you sort of have to be accountable and find out yourself. And I'm not sure where, you know, I'm sure how this communication issue kind of has evolved over time. And you probably know more than anyone, Anne, because you sit at that intersection of local businesses and sort of EDAB. I'm just curious if you could give us some context to that.
Do you mean in terms of the businesses' involvement and the communication to them? Is that right?
Yes, yes,
I mean,
yes.
let's use Foie Gras as an example. I mean, the town process, if a warrant article is going through the town process, there are a ton of meetings. Many of them are at night. Restaurants are all open now. And they can't come to meetings. During the Foie Gras discussions, a number of times I heard the proponents saying, but they're not even here. They're never going to be here at 7 o'clock on a weeknight because they're working. So the issue is getting input from them at other times of the day, and talking to them and finding out what the impacts of a particular article are. And we'll talk a little bit more about this with the next item about the dark skies, because we actually are starting to get some of that input. I think that one of the things in this rubric that we need to add, or we need to be able to talk to proponents about, is, have you talked to businesses? What is it going to cost to do whatever it is you're proposing to do? How long is it going to take you? Is it even possible? things like that, which aren't happening now. And if we get this on a rubric and Meredith or Aaron, I was on some meeting recently where there's a town, oh, I know, I asked a question. I have never drafted a warrant article, and I didn't know what people do to get started. And apparently, there's a page on the town website that has a list of things you need to do or you should do in order to get a warrant article drafted. And what I think we need to do is get some of this stuff on there as well, so people know when they're getting started that that's an expectation, that the business community should be involved somehow. And there are ways, the Small Business Development Committee is one way. There are a few people, I mean, Ailish Gilligan, who's the owner of the Public House, is the chair of that organization. But there aren't that many actual retailers on that committee. There are people who have other small businesses. The Coolidge Corner Merchants Association is very active and gets very involved in these things. And we talk to them, and Aaron talks to them all the time. And there's a Brookline Village one. We need to be more, we need to go out and talk to them more and let them, the one time when the Brookline Village organization got very active was when the housing on the Kent Street lot, when that proposal was there a couple of years ago, and they heard about it. And once they heard about it and understood what the implications were, they got very proactive. And we have to make sure that people hear about things. Did that answer your question, Zaina?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. You really put it in context for me. I appreciate that.
Okay. Anybody else? Lily, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you had raised this early on, and I'm just wondering whether you had any other thoughts. And if you don't, that's fine. Like I said, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. And you've moved inside, I see. Is it getting cold?
I've moved 3 different places. We just own, there's one Wi-Fi router, and everyone in this is in the room where it is. So I moved to a quieter place, but now there wasn't Wi-Fi. So I'm telling you guys, no internet up here. I was just gonna say, I think I really wanted to echo that sentiment of that outreach piece, and that piece that I think there is a little bit more legwork we can be doing. And there was even within our later updates that we have that I think are kind of pieces that I think could be very relevant to this as well, for some of the updates that staff are giving later that we can kind of circle back and talk about.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts about this? Well, I guess I hadn't really thought about it, but I guess I am willing to work on this, on working on this. Is somebody else or 1 or 2 other people willing to do that as well? And is this posted public meetings and stuff? What is this
I think it'll depend on how many other people raise their hand by the end of
okay.
this discussion.
Well, it would be nice if at least one other person raised their hand. I don't see any other raised hands. Well, why doesn't
Anne, I'm happy to work on it with you.
That's great, Lily. Thank you. All right. And if anybody else would like to join us, just let me know. But let's start with the 2 of us. That's great. So that's it for this. And now we're going to move into, is that right, Meredith? That's where we wanted to end up, with some volunteers.
Perfect. Yep.
So as somebody mentioned, Lily mentioned, I think, we actually have this is the first time in my memory that we have seen a draft warrant article that impacts the commercial areas before it's filed, so that we can make some suggestions to the proponents, one of whom I see on this call, about how to improve this so that it doesn't negatively impact the businesses and the commercial areas. And thank you for the feedback that a number of people sent that Meredith and Aaron have organized. I hope everybody had a chance to read it. Should we go through that? The summary? Or has everybody read it? Do you want to put it up?
I think we now have a consolidated list of feedback
The
from,
initial
right?
feedback, yeah, the
Yeah.
initial EDAP feedback on preliminary draft. This 3-page document is what I'm talking about.
Right.
With some initial thoughts for next steps. Why don't you put it up, Meredith, and we can hopefully go through it quickly.
Sure. Jess, do you have those documents open yet? Or if not, I can.
So again, thank you for everybody who sent in concerns, and they were in a bunch of different areas. Do you want to go through them, Meredith, or shall I?
Sure, I can just
Yeah.
talk through them.
Yeah, just quickly in terms of the themes, it's the themes that you heard, because that's how you've organized them, and this is great.
Sure. So I think there were sort of at the core, there were a lot of concerns about scope and feasibility of the proposal. There were definitely questions about enforcement, some question marks and sort of, you know, what would the building department be basing their enforcement on? You know, do we have the staffing and the resources to follow through with the proposed requirements? I think and I was not very involved with the previous town meeting warrant article discussions regarding lighting that the planning department had proposed, but I think one of the issues was the recent efforts to add some additional regulations with lighting did not include the commercial areas and were proposed to be in the zoning bylaw. And there was interest in having those regulations be in the general bylaw because it provides more flexibility to address existing issues as opposed to trying to regulate lighting related to new construction and development. So that was sort of a concern that was flagged here. And then Jess, if you want to keep scrolling through. There were some concerns. I think in general, the feedback seemed to relate to the fact that the specific needs and requirements for businesses and for commercial area vitality, safety, function really weren't clearly contemplated in the draft warrant article language. So there were lots of questions and sort of sections of the proposal flagged for that. I think particularly people honed in on the proposed 10 a.m. kind of shut off time, which is a lot of the restaurants are still serving at that hour and their staff won't leave for many hours after that. And there was also sort of a flag of the ongoing pilot that we have after the Harvard Street rezoning passed, where there are some new lighting proposals included in that, which relates to the Harvard Street corridor. And the intention was that that was sort of serving as a pilot for additional outdoor lighting standards. And unfortunately, there hasn't been the level of development at this point along the Harvard Street corridor for us to have a lot of good feedback about, you know, the how easy it is for new development to comply for that. So there was the sort of the suggestion that we should follow through with the Harvard Street outdoor lighting pilot, and you know, if what we learn from that, we can try to incorporate into regulations. And then also, just as we talked about, previous lighting warrant article proposals at town meeting did not include the commercial areas. There was some reference to the fact that other communities have outdoor lighting standards. Those largely apply to new developments. They weren't retroactive, and that the set of exemptions involved in those were much broader. So what's being proposed for Brookline, even though it doesn't really seem customized to the commercial areas, is certainly a lot more expansive than what peer communities like Cambridge, Newton, Waterville, Watertown, and Somerville currently have. So that's in a nutshell. And then we conclude with sort of the the thoughts about next steps and what to do with this. I think there were kind of two tiers of recommendations. There was, one thought about it seems that at this point, commercial property should really be exempt from these proposed outdoor lighting standards, and that we should continue to focus on the Harvard Street outdoor lighting pilot. And then there was also the sense that if, the commercial areas were going to remain a piece of this proposal, there should be modifications in the language to sort of narrow it or provide voluntary compliance instead of making it a requirement. And then going back to the earlier conversation about sort of what's driving the interest in developing a business or commercial area impact assessment is, really making sure that businesses and people who would be directly impacted by the legislation or the proposed warrant article were consulted appropriately to be able to inform, impacts and feasibility of what's being proposed. So there are a lot of question marks in terms of if businesses had been spoken to and consulted, if we had any estimates about what it would cost for your average business to comply. And I think that's pretty much it.
So some other things, I mean, what we were just saying in our last discussion, I think that going out, having proponents go out and actually find out what it means to a couple of businesses, certainly a restaurant and a retailer, a small retailer, not CVS, is critical for all of these things. And people don't normally do that. I was surprised when I read this that there's no difference in the draft that we saw between the commercial areas and the residential areas. I mean, the needs are totally different. And I was talking to a restaurant operator today who mentioned that the insurance company cares about things like outdoor lights because they're an insurance company. And if there's not enough lighting on the sidewalk when people are leaving at 1 o'clock in the morning, that's a problem. So we need to make sure that other elements like that are taken into consideration as well.
And I was just going to add, this is absolutely a life safety issue, right?
Yes.
People don't trip and fall and hazardous, and after they've had a drink or so, it's just, so I'm not sure how you define to what level and extent is health and safety put at risk, but it certainly is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just, I mean, the Coolidge, has midnight movies and people need to get out of there safely and get to their cars safely after going to the movie. And just FYI, for those who don't know it, there have been lots of conversations over the last couple of years, particularly in Coolidge Corner, by the merchants about the fact that if you drive through other commercial areas in the greater Boston area, they're much better lit and much more festive during the holidays than any Brookline commercial area is, but particularly Coolidge Corner. And they've been trying to figure out how to make things brighter during the holidays for the last few years. So that's another issue. Al.
So I read the draft and I read the EDAB comments, and I agree with the EDAB comments. This feels like a very premature overreach to me.
Okay, Derek.
Yeah, I just want to put a little bit of context to the Dark Skies initiative. The International Dark Skies program, if I remember correctly, has over maybe 40 communities in the United States. And to adopt the dark sky standards, most of these communities, by and large, range from about 2,000 inhabitants to anywhere to 15, maybe the high teens in terms of community size. So it is a very different type of community that we're looking at. I think Sedona, Arizona was one of the first dark skies communities. So just to kind of get a sense of the sort of parallel universe that we're dealing with here. And to everyone's point, there are practical insurance requirements. There are practical operational requirements for businesses, whether it's a shift change. Some businesses, operate, well past 10 p.m. And there are appropriate guidance from the zoning bylaw as well as our currently promulgated signage guidelines. So I think there's quite a bit of alignment that we need to think about. And when you put it in context, even going outside of Somerville, Cambridge, and Watertown, there are communities that have not adopted the dark skies, but have used it as a model to find the appropriate, I would say the appropriate zoning opportunities. So when you talk about the I's, the G type districts, there's a time and place for it. And I think Morristown, New Jersey is a good example where they've been able to identify a retail operation in a residential location where there's a little bit more of a, I will call it a dark sky centric approach. And then you could have one in the main commercial business district where retail, would be going under a completely different illumination category. So I think there are some practical and operational, and as everyone mentioned, some enforcement challenges that need to be kind of contemplated as we continue to think about the appropriateness of this dark skies approach to this community, at least to our community of over 60,000 occupants. So just a thought here.
Thanks, Derek. Now that's some important context, and we're surrounded on three sides by the city of Boston.
Yes.
Fenway Park isn't going to go away.
Yes.
So, Lily.
Yeah, I definitely share a lot of the concerns that were raised. And I apologize. I don't know, Meredith and Jessica, if you guys could turn the chat on, just because I have a lot of background noise. That'd be great. But I just also wanted to raise, I know as a committee, we've really been looking at, wayfinding as a priority of the Economic Development Board. And I'm just, concerned again about how this kind of an article would impact our wayfinding efforts. It's hard enough to find where people can get places, and then we're taking the lights out. But again, I've been in many communities that do have things like this. I don't think it's, inherently bad as a policy. I just think that we should make sure that we're being thoughtful about a lot of these overlapping pieces.
Thanks. Tom.
I completely agree with the list of comments and concerns that have been raised and be written down. On the other hand, I think for new construction, it's entirely appropriate to look at lighting fixtures that direct the lights to where it's needed, down towards the ground and not up in the sky. And there are plenty of fixtures that will do that. But in terms of replacing existing fixtures, I don't think that can be mandated. I think that's something that needs to be, as was suggested, probably voluntary. The objective of trying to make the skies less bright is a good objective. On the other hand, as we said, public safety is a big concern and should be really the highest requirement for what we're talking about.
Thanks, Tom. That's I think it was here somewhere, thinking about the difference between new construction and existing businesses. The other thing I meant to mention, just if people aren't aware, there's a group from the Council on Aging who's been actively working to get more lighting on the sidewalks in general, because a lot of the sidewalks in town are very difficult for people to see the sidewalks, particularly in this case in residential areas. But that's been going on for a while. I have no idea where that is in terms of planning, but that's the other side of this issue, or the stuff Mark was talking about. Ken, and then Sandy.
So two comments. As the planning board actively reviews lighting requirements when it's related to new signage proposals. So we should just keep that in mind, that that's something that they look at very carefully, and most of them are architects, landscape architects. Secondly, there was a recent article in the New York Times about the Dark Skies program in Pittsburgh, and they focused on the upgrading public street lights, and that included replacing lamps with softer LED lights with warmer tones, and then having Wi-Fi and remote controls, and then of course shields to direct the lighting. and they had a very positive assessment of this program from energy savings and then well as mitigation of the secondary impacts of the lighting. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, where are we on this in the public realm? Isn't that the first area that we should be looking at as a town, the street lights and how those can be addressed in this initiative?
Yeah, that's a good question. I thought that I had read somewhere that over the last couple of years, the town is slowly changing the streetlights to LEDs. Does anybody know if that's correct? But we should get an answer to your question.
Yeah, the Pittsburgh model has more sophisticated controls in terms of timing and when the lights can be dimmed, and whether it changes in seasons and weather and things like that. It sounds like a pretty positive approach.
Actually, now that I think of it, I think some of the Council on Aging's concerns have been in response to some of those lighting changes on the streetlights around town. There's less light on the sidewalk when people who can't see as well are walking. I think that's what precipitated the concern. I may be wrong. Anyway, thanks, Ken. Sandy.
So I just wanted to quickly thank the members of EDAB that took the time to review this ahead of time. I think it's made this conversation go a lot quicker and gave us a lot of food for thought as an example of how to kind of do a deep dive on an issue like this, and really get the true expertise of our EDAB members to the forefront on it. I agree with pretty much everything that was put into writing and really appreciate staff kind of summarizing the comments. And also think that there's differences and distinctions even within the commercial areas, right? I could see there being lower lighting desired at, say, Putterham, which is in a very residential area and near the golf course and near a lot of open space. And you don't, people do walk to Putterham, but it's not the same as what's happening at Coolidge Corner, right? And so I think that they're like doing a blanket approach, as this one article was suggesting, is not the right thing for Brookline. While I definitely support the idea of darker skies, I also just want to reiterate the comments about, where we're next to Brookline. I can't imagine that making the sky darker near St. Mary's is going to have any real impact, well, because of the neighbors. So if we're really thinking about this to me is a classic opportunity to do a pilot study, do a pilot recommendation in a particular area. And I would recommend an area like Putterham for it, to really see, like, what does it take? How much staff time does it take to implement? Are there grants and rebates and whatnot to help support the businesses? Because then we'd be able to take that knowledge and say, here's what we really can do, and here's what works. And we'd also know what actually doesn't work. But a blanket thing like this, I think, is really hard. And I just, again, want to commend and thank my fellow EDAB members who really dug in, because it was super helpful for someone like me who doesn't know all those nitty-gritty items, but you made it a lot easier to digest.
Thank you, Sandy. So I think Ken mentioned the planning board and their meeting. Did you say the 20th? On the 20th, again, with this draft for comments. And what we were thinking was that we should take this list or turn this into a memo or something with all the items on our list and get that to the planning board so that they know about our concerns before their meeting. And I guess in order to do that, we would need a vote that enables Sandy and I to do that. Does that make sense to people as a next step? And then
sorry, just for clarification. So in terms of sort of written feedback, formal written feedback, I did point out, especially in terms of next steps, there are a couple options. There's, try to modify the existing language and tailor it more to the commercial areas. And then there was this other camp that was saying, I think the commercial areas should be removed from the scope of this current proposal. So do you want to move forward with an all of the above approach, or does EDAB want to take more of a position in terms of?
May I motion to remove the commercial districts from the ongoing initiative? I am a strong proponent that there's probably a time and place for dark skies. You know, potentially in this community, it's going to need a lot of work, but I would like to just get it out there and motion that we remove, including the business district. I'd say any industrial and overall G districts should be removed from this warrant article.
I second it.
So what we have on here is G, L, O, and I.
And
yes.
I think we should also specify the Harvard Street zoning. I'm sorry, that should have been included.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. It does actually say in the Harvard Street form-based zoning.
Great. Perfect.
So is that, okay, that's on here.
Right.
That's one of the options that we identified.
Yes.
Okay. Marilyn.
I guess I want to go back to the question you were raising, Anne, because I think we're maybe in this motion, I think we're really jumping ahead of where the process needs to be and should be right now. You know, I do want to commend the proponents for giving us their preliminary warrant article draft to take a look at so that we could start thinking about it. That doesn't mean that we're going to stop thinking about it, and that doesn't mean that we're going to foreclose other discussion. I don't think that's the intent of EDAB at all, and therefore I think this the motion that we have the answer to this now is premature in my mind. I would, if we follow through with it, I would not support it, because I think we need to stop here and say this was a helpful initial exchange of ideas, and we'd like to give our feedback to the proponents and let them think about it and work on it. And I think we'd also like to let the planning board know what we thought at a first look, but I don't think we're ready to make decisions or recommendations about this. And so I would alternatively just propose that we authorize the chair and the co-chair and Sandy to by some appropriate communication with the planning board, give them our summary, tell them that we looked at this, give them our summary of feedback, one paragraph cover memo, and attach the summary. I think that gets the thoughts across, and then the planning board knows what we were thinking initially anyway.
I think, yeah, that's what I was proposing, just to do something with the planning board now. I'm assuming that we're going to end up, assuming this is filed, that we will have a hearing on, that we'll hear it more formally. And I think that would be September 29th. Remember, on October, there were too many, we can't meet in October. So it'd probably be the September 29th meeting, because the next one would be too late, I think. But I'm assuming that we'll go through that process as well. And also I see both Ira and Clint are here, and if they want to talk about this over the next couple of weeks, and again, there's plenty of time to do editing now, and that would be terrific.
And sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Could we just make sure we're all on the same page? We are motioning to formalize and refine our initial EDAB response to the basic tenet of this draft warrant article, to give the proponents an opportunity to further socialize and engage any critical stakeholders that we've already mentioned in the prior conversation, to get a more robust dialogue before the formal presentation in September.
Well, actually, what I was asking was just for everybody to agree that we send this list, or a modified version of the list, to the planning board at this point. And I don't know if we need a vote to talk to the proponents, we can do that, but I don't think we need.
No, I'm just saying that I think we all agree that we want to just kind of get our initial feedback out to the planning board. But I would motion to refine and ensure that we've gotten all our ducks in a row in terms of our initial response. I think there were probably a few speaking for myself, that I would return back with a few comments. So,
All right, well, if assuming that we agree to send something to the board, if you can
Yep.
get your comments to
Yep.
Jessica ASAP.
great.
That
Will
would
do.
be helpful, because we've got like a week and a half.
Got
I
it.
guess, to get
Okay.
this out to
Great.
the. Does that make sense to everybody? As a way to move forward? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so we need a motion, or I'll make a motion to edit this as needed and send it, this is the initial EDAP feedback on preliminary draft of the Dark Skies warrant article. I will make a motion to edit that and get it to the planning board before so that they can take a look at it before their August 20th meeting.
I second that.
Okay, Marilyn,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Derek,
Yes.
Lily,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Zaina,
Yes.
and Sandy.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Well, thank you. This has been very helpful.
Can I just make a statement?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for spending so much time and effort. And I don't agree with everything I've heard, but a lot of good things to think about and look into, and appreciate having another opportunity to ask you some questions and fill in some of the details.
Okay, well, thank you, Ira. And get in touch. I'm happy to talk to you about it. And, give you some more background on some of the stuff that's on here, as probably our other people on EDAB, but we can certainly do that anytime.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Next up is Zach for the Center Street lots update.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Let me just, whoever's meeting this, if you could
Yeah.
me tell us the screen sharing, please.
You're a little fuzzy, Zach, the audio.
Sometimes I have trouble with this computer. Is it better if I lean in a bit?
Yes.
Whoever is running the meeting, if you could make me a co-host so I could screen share, please.
Okay, promoted.
Great. Just trying to make this a little bit. Can you folks see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. And Anne, please feel free to jump in at any time. We are, of course, very fortunate that the Central Hawks Committee we have as one of our members the chair of EDAB. So please feel free to jump in if there's anything that I'm missing. But just as a really quick recap, we're talking about the Center Street lots, which is the large rectangular parking lot behind the Coolidge Corner Theater, sort of between Harvard and Beacon Streets, as well as the west lot across the street, which is used for a municipal permit parking program. Currently about 200 parking spaces in total, about 2.5 acres of land in the middle of Coolidge Corner. So right now we are in this phase kind of between finishing developing some options and beginning to kind of analyze those further, doing some testing about traffic impacts and operations and maintenance. So this evening, kind of close to the end of my update, I'll be presenting to you folks the latest sort of menu of conceptual design options that these consultants like Dempsey have prepared for us. I just want to flag that the next committee meeting will be held Thursday, August 21st at 6 p.m., both in Town Hall, room 103, and via Zoom. Some quick results of the community survey. I won't run through this, but was advertised in a whole bunch of different ways through physical media, like we see this A-frame and Century Lots, as well as social media, etc. We received 783 responses, and we were pretty pleased with that turnout. Some key observations were basically that folks pretty consistently told us that they agree that these lots are a pretty key facilitator of this neighborhood's kind of commercial success and vibrancy, and just that these lots really make the place feel accessible, particularly to people who are getting to Coolidge Corner in a car. A lot of people feel that the lots do work well today, and a lot of people also said that there were certainly some areas of room for improvement. We'll go into this later, but when asked, about a third of respondents were open to reducing parking in some way to accommodate other uses on site, while 2/3 were cautious or outright opposed in terms of reducing parking. So when we asked what's currently working well in the lots, and also, of course, we're looking carefully at kind of the 5 walkways, if you can see my cursor, which sort of go at Harvard Street, at Beacon Street, and make these lots so well connected. So people said that there's usually parking available, even if you have to kind of circle or wait a minute. Most everyone has told me that one of the things they like the best about this lot is that they're almost guaranteed a space if they go looking for one there. Folks really appreciate walking through and the cut throughs that these different paths provide. And I think just the easy access to the different businesses in and around Coolidge Corner is really valued by people. I think kind of the central location of the Center Street lots seems very high in people's minds. In terms of what could be improved, there were certainly a lot of ideas: lighting, seated signage, handicap spots. Lots of folks spoke to cleanliness as well as rodents, which I know DPW is already kind of testing with some new strategies in terms of doing a bit better on that. A lot of folks mentioned traffic flow and congestion, which is certainly something that any scenario will be vastly improving the congestion in the lots, which is pretty severe at times, I've seen for myself. Some folks have requested more parking, more electric vehicle parking. Signage certainly is something that we've heard repeated. So these are some of the things that people think could be improved in the lots and in the walkways leading out of them. In terms of, we asked folks on their perspective in terms of kind of thinking about the future of the Center Street lots. 49% say that they're open to the concept of changing the use of the lots, but not at the expense of less parking. So open to changing the lots in some way, the way that they're configured, the way that that parking is facilitated, but not open to having less parking in that location. About 1/3 were open to some parking going away for accommodating other uses like public space, and the remaining respondents were not okay with reducing the parking in the lots. We did follow up with a question: if the use of the lots were to be changed in some way, what would be your top priority? Just under half of respondents said that their top priority would be green space, followed by housing, and this is pretty consistent both with what we've heard in prior planning efforts around the Center Street lots and Coolidge Corner, as well as maybe echoing some of what Jake was saying earlier this evening on the comp plan. Some additional narrative responses that we pulled out: these lots shouldn't be changed because there would be few places to park without them. They're essential. Happy to see open space and more greenery. One requesting a mixed-use development with a parking garage that could appease everyone, provide public space with additional retail and residential units. So really, this has been a very open-ended conversation, and we really appreciate this rich community feedback. Kind of turning to another piece of the engagement, I hope many of you on the call this evening had an opportunity to check out the parklet that we had up for roughly 2.5 weeks in the Center Street lots. We had some really interesting activities, a few kind of in combination with some local businesses, working with Top Drawer, with Craftstone, as well as a community food drive. So we got a great turnout at some of these events. We see here some various folks using the parklet. And as part of this activity, the committee put out a parklet survey in collaboration with Eisenberg Projects, who helped us put this parklet together. So just wanted to pull out the results of that survey as well, which we found pretty interesting and were pretty polarizing, we felt. So indicate whether you agree, disagree, or feel neutral towards the following statements: that this parklet is a good use of parking spaces. People almost completely agree or disagree, and we're very evenly split on that kind of question. And we've seen many of these others. There are some folks who kind of feel neutral, but for the most part, these questions about the Center Street lots and how they should be used and how this parklet experiment was received, the responses are pretty polarizing, and that comes through in the next question as well, in terms of ranking what could be a priority in future plans for the Center Street lots. And if we jump over here to maintaining parking availability, that's both the #1 highest priority and the #1 lowest priority. So I certainly found that to be interesting. Some other top priorities, we see more plants and greenery, providing additional utility like public space, more housing units, making the site more comfortable, and safer is far and away the #2 priority. So this is all pretty consistent with what we've heard. Certainly this point around maintaining parking availability, and that's seeming incredibly important to some people and not really so super important to others, as maybe some of these other uses like opening the lots up to some public space. So definitely thought that was interesting, and certainly kind of fueled some of the consultants' inspiration as we moved into kind of outlining what we'll call a menu of preliminary sort of conceptual design options for the Center Street lots. I did want to quickly flag some of the engagement that we performed. I don't have time tonight to kind of dive into what we've learned from these various engagements, but I do want to flag for folks' calendars, we have a talk coming up on September 10th. That's going to be held at the Coolidge Corner Theater, and we're going to be doing some marketing for that over the coming month, which I certainly hope will reach the EDAB members. I'll make sure of it. But just wanted to have you all make a flag for this in your calendars if you could for September 10th at 7 p.m. We'll really hope you'll join us for a talk about both walkability in Brookline and about the future of the Center Street lots. And this is the flyer for that talk. So moving into this piece that I was talking about in terms of the consultants' analysis and design of the site, they certainly have been very interested in what they are talking about in terms of these desire lines that kind of cut through. And we see from Harvard Street and from Beacon Street, and even from Winchester, the site is really well connected, in some cases straight through across to Harvard. So certainly that is kind of, we see that reflected in many of the kind of design gestures that we'll see in the next.
Zach, sorry, are you still sharing screen? I might be the one having a AV issue.
Is it not coming through?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, I'm the one with the issue. My apologies.
Apologies, Derek. Certainly, this presentation is available online in the agenda packet if it's easier to follow along there.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So these are the active options. I saw a quick note from and before the meeting, and I should note that basically 5 options were presented to the committee at their last meeting. One was kind of immediately ruled as a non-starter, and so that left 4 with really the scope within the study for the consultants to study 3 of those 4 options in much greater depth. And ultimately, perhaps Anne could speak to the committee's perspective on this, but my sort of takeaway was that the first option, which I'll show in a moment, basically would involve a really beautiful and refreshed surface parking lot that would ultimately functionally work pretty similarly and in an improved way to what's there today, but wouldn't really be a more intense use. We're talking about a surface parking lot, and the committee agreed that in comparison with the other options that do involve kind of larger changes to the site, that those options would be worth studying in greater depth. So the first option I'm going to be showing here, which is called the Grove, is not going to be necessarily visualized by the consultants in the same manner that they're going to be visualizing and studying these other options. And the committee really decided that that's just in part because this option is easiest to understand, and there's some work that we can do kind of internally within Town Hall to some of the Option 1 is for an improved surface parking lot called the Grove because the theme is really to plant a whole bunch of trees. There has been a lot of interest around what if we put a bunch of solar panels on top of the Center Street lots, which certainly is kind of the right spirit of an idea, but it turns out that planting a whole bunch of trees is certainly a lot greener, provides a lot more cooling, and oh, sorry, was there, I thought I heard a comment. It's just more aesthetically pleasing and a better environment to be in. So this is kind of looking from a plan view. What this would involve is completely reconfiguring. We kind of pick up a few parking spaces by really reconfiguring how the parking lot works today in terms of sort of the driving stalls. And we certainly pick up some extra spaces in the east lot. And we're showing basically just a whole bunch of trees here and really trying to focus on the central corridor that connects through from Harvard Street all the way out to Winchester Street. The west lot, we're seeing a sort of drivable plaza, keeping the west lot intact basically for its current use and just allowing a much nicer and safer walking experience kind of across this axis. That's kind of the first option.
And the assumption is the farmer's market would stay there.
Yes, or could even spill out maybe across the street a little bit. I've certainly spoken with Abe a lot, and it seems that if there were capacity, they could fit a number of additional stalls. So that's kind of option 1. It's certainly the most straightforward, and if there are no initial questions or reactions, I can move into the second concept, which the second concept was the non-starter. So the second one is actually option 3, which we're calling the side lot. And this is where we start looking at some structured parking, like a parking garage. So I'll try to explain what's happening here, which is if we're looking at Center Street, this is the Coolidge Corner Theater, and here we have CVS and Maruichi and the Brookline Arcade. Sort of in front of where the Brookline Arcade is, we're proposing a multi-level parking garage to be constructed that would have on one face at least some kind of, I don't want to say narrow, but smaller format, smaller scale retail spaces. There would be an open but drivable plaza with a whole bunch of trees on the edge and creating a really active edge with Maruichi here and a new mixed-use building to be created here with an active ground floor. We see we're kind of picking back up the pocket park that is currently being used by Hamilton for their beer garden. And that has become part of a scheme that sees the west lot also reimagined as sort of a mixed-use development with I believe these are several townhouses on the left side here, and a sort of medium scale mixed use development on the other side across this walking axis, which is maintained, I believe, in all these different scenarios. And I certainly could get the numbers off of this. I think the reason that the consultants haven't provided us to them is that they were able to kind of move right into the analysis, and they're working to get some really concrete numbers instead of giving us kind of another set of ballparks. But I believe that this parking garage was proposed to increase the current parking in the combined lots by at least 50% or so. And please feel free to correct me if that doesn't sound correct.
I don't.
At least what, Zach?
The parking garage, I was saying, would replace all of the existing parking and also increase the parking by 50%.
50%. Thank you.
How many levels is that, Zach?
I believe it was being scaled at something like 4 or 5. But a lot of this is also kind of being, these are very conceptual diagrams. We since have done some recalibrating both with the committee. We had a really productive discussion actually with the fire department last week to talk about kind of fire code informed design. So there's some reconfigurations still taking place, but I believe that this garage was discussed as no more than 5 levels at the last I had discussed with the consultants. So that's option 3, which we're calling the side lot because this garage kind of falls on the side. The next scheme is called the colonnade, also a structured parking deck, and it's a bit more difficult to understand in a plan view. But what we're seeing, I'll try to explain, is that basically if we were trying to park, we would pull in off of Center Street and go off up a ramp, and there would be a parking structure kind of happening across a large space of the east lot for a few levels, maybe, levels 2 through 5 as above, or I'm not sure the consultants would have to speak more specifically to the dimensions they're thinking about. But the rationale for this scheme is that the first floor, instead of having just more parking, you would be able to create, we're thinking, of course, of the farmer's market during this process and how this farmer's market in Haymaker is located under this overpass. There's a precedent that was just made by a firm called Utile. I don't know if anyone's familiar. Basically, for a parking garage that starts high up on the second level with maybe a 15-foot arch space that's created underneath using precast concrete pieces, essentially. And that would allow for a sort of covered but open air feeling type plaza underneath where the farmer's market could have a sheltered space to do their market. And this is certainly a much less traditional kind of configuration in which to do a parking garage. But as we'll see at the end, SpecMC prepared for us to kind of review criteria comparing these different options and what they accomplish. And option 4 for the colonnade was actually the only scheme that sort of met each of those criteria in some way. So we're continuing to advance this scheme. It's definitely not super traditional, but we do find it compelling, and we're continuing to speak with the farmers market as well about if a farmers market in this sort of space is both workable and appealing to them in terms of having protection from the elements and that sort of thing. So that's the 4th scheme, and the last one that kind of deals with structured parking in an above ground garage. The last option, option 5, speaks to an underground parking garage and basically the level of public-private development that would be necessary to make that sort of scheme viable. So what we're seeing here is, I guess what we're not seeing is probably a 2, but likely more like a 3-story underground garage beneath the east lot. And what SpecMC, I believe, is working on right now and will be continuing to work on over the coming months is trying to better understand, as well as trying to visualize, the pretty significant level of development that would be needed in order to finance underground parking of 2 or 3 levels in Village Corner. And the scale of buildings where we see these kind of red elements here, we see a pathway in between, but this dashed line represents kind of a tower to rise above. And I believe the heights that they were looking at, we're going to cap out around 14 stories. But that's certainly something that they're currently studying. And of course, in the current market, we don't much happening at all by way of mixed use development from under very certain conditions. But they'll be helping us to kind of think about this underground parking solution and basically what the trade-offs would be in terms of thinking about space 3-dimensionally in this area in the middle of Coolidge Corner.
Can you just say something about this? Well, maybe go through the next slide.
Sure.
Zach, sorry to interrupt. Before
please.
if you can go back to you have
Let me
you
just
have-
say something
yeah.
about this option, just so everybody knows.
Thank you.
Nobody in this committee thinks that this is a viable alternative.
I understand, but I guess the question is, there's a development in the arcade building. Why is there? Is that the 14-story piece?
No,
yeah,
the
right there.
14-story
This little piece here is actually, this is a little parking lot that you may have noticed right next to the arcade building. I don't know.
But it's not the city, it's not the town's property. So I'm just trying to understand, why is there a deviation in this scheme?
Oh, no, I know. I think Spec Dempsey, we're just seeing that this surface parking lot is, if the owner of this property were interested,
Correct.
there's an opportunity to put, I
Okay.
believe what they call a sausage granny flat or something like that, which basically involves you take out 1 parking space to put a staircase. And then on the 2nd story, you can put in a few apartments. So of course, that would only be if the landowner were interested. This is not town property, but just something that Spec Dempsey was suggesting would be a better use of the space than just having storage here.
Gotcha.
What I was going to say is, just in terms of our time and the committee's time, nobody thinks, I mean, we talked a little bit, there are a couple of developers on the committee about how this would have to be a public-private partnership. I mean, there were a couple of people, one of whom's a town meeting member, who doesn't feel that people understand why it's not viable to build an underground parking garage and have development above it until they see all the numbers and see everything that's involved, which is why this is still on the table for further study. It's not because, at least I had the impression that there wasn't a single person on the committee who thinks that this would ever happen. And but that's why it was chosen as the 3rd option. Sandy?
Sandy, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I would just add that in my experience of late, underground space is probably $150,000 to $200,000 a space. And so when you start thinking about what kind of revenue you need to support that and have it break even, it gets to be like $500, $600, $700 a month probably in revenue, and that results in a pretty high parking rate. And if you think about downtown parking garages charging $45, $50 and up, that math starts to get really scary in Brookline, I would say. So I'll just put that out there as a placeholder, right? Obviously, I'm sure people will price that up, but there's a reason we haven't seen underground parking in any of the development that's happened on Harvard Street and whatnot, because you really need significant density to support that. What I really, and I don't know if I assume we were close to done here, but what I really wanted to comment on was the retail pieces, right? And this is really about economic viability of those retail pieces and really making sure that there is, we're getting feedback about the depth of that retail, because some of those retail areas look, and I can't tell scale from these plans, looked really narrow. So I just want to kind of put that out there to make sure we're really checking that, because if it's going to be shallow retail, maybe it's more suitable for a landing spot for a food truck or for multiple food trucks or something like that, to get at the idea of, or, you know, kind of those pop-up type of things, as opposed to providing not very viable, bad retail space, right? Like, let's make sure we're being additive here, not the alternative. And then the other thing I wanted to note, just for the committee, if they didn't already know of it, there's some excellent examples in other locations of it's often under a freeway type of thing or highway. Like Seattle has an excellent market in the Fremont neighborhood that's super viable, a destination, great, really active outdoor market that sits under the freeway. And it's I mean, it's just it's a destination, right? And so that the opportunity that UTL presented there, I think coupling this presentation with some of those places where you've got really viable things, and that really works in a place like Seattle, which has a lot of rain, because it's always covered. And so when we think about, you know, what is our challenge of farmers markets in the winter, having it be super exposed, like you could imagine if we put some heating elements in there, suddenly we get to 4-season space, right? And I think that whatever we're doing needs to be able to be something that is across all the seasons, so that, you know, if it's under, you know, in that scenario, I think that was scenario 4, that it's really thought through and planned for to be multi-seasonal, because only having something in the summer and the fall, I think is not great, right? Then what happens the rest of the time, et cetera. So just wanted to put those thoughts in the mix, but really excellent thinking here and far different than what I was expecting. So thank you for all the efforts here, Zach.
Yeah, thank you for your feedback, Sandy. I appreciate it.
This is the last slide, right, Zach?
Yeah, I don't know that I even need to speak through this.
Everybody,
I just
yeah,
wanted to put this on the screen as we speak through these different options. This is putting out a few different metrics about sort of the pros and cons of each, what they provide and what they don't. So just wanted to pull this up as we're thinking through these different options and comparing them.
Why don't you leave that, and then we can get more comments. Alan, excuse me.
I guess I had a few comments about schemes 3, 4, and 5. 4, one thing that would be helpful is to understand how the actual parking works there. It's not really spelled out at all in the slides. You know, there's a ramp going up. Is it occupying the full footprint of the site, or just it seems very inefficient? And then another comment about scheme 4, I find just after tearing down, you know, Government Center Garage, this to be a really suspect option here for me. It just, the farmers market doesn't even operate enough, I think, to justify this massive a space for it, and I feel like it's just going to be bleak and empty all the time, you know, and it should either be enclosed, and you know, you could have an enclosed farmers market, those exist all over the place, or I don't know, there needs to be some other idea about what that is, because there's almost no open space on this site, and it seems like a really bleak option. Other options, 5 seems to me like Waldo Durgan. It's the same approach that was taken there, which, you know, hasn't been built yet. And I do think there's a good variety of public spaces there. I wonder on, honestly, both that and option 3, why it seems like the Coolidge Corner Theater, the new entrance, is very marginalized in this approach, and actually most of the circulation to the lot happens by Coolidge Corner Theater, and there's been this emphasis on this like straight line, from Beacon Street to Harvard Street in the middle, but I'm not sure that's where most of the activity is happening. So I wonder if there's another way to think about that. Option 3 seems most affordable and creates a decent public space, but I think there may be some configuration concerns that have with it. And I guess those are my comments.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Alan.
Al.
So I think there's a lot to like in both of the above ground garage options. I hear and somewhat agree with Alan's concerns about the colonnade. Although if that space were enclosed, it could be used in a different and more versatile, more economically versatile way than just the farmer's market. And when Sandy was saying about markets under freeways, which is certainly true, it also struck me that there's a resemblance to there are a number of train stations in England where viaduct type spaces underneath the viaducts, vaulted spaces like the ones in the rendering, and I'm wondering if that was part of what the team had in mind. Are enclosed and turned into retail spaces that are kind of cool. But anyway, we're not trying to figure out the design stuff tonight. But as a general observation, I think 3 and 4 are completely alternative ways of thinking about how to organize the site around an above ground garage. And I think that there's things to recommend either of those. I agree with the committee that number 5, as attractive as it is in the abstract, probably isn't a worthwhile idea to pursue. But it does beg my principal question to Zach, which is, Zach, what in general, what assumption is implicit here about the extent to which the associated development can fund the project? We can all agree that it would take something monumental to fund number 5, but none of the development we're talking about is going to fund number 3 or number 4 either. Am I wrong?
I believe that at the very least, the developments are being calibrated to fund the parking, at least in great part, and that's why we see some of those new developments on public land. Is to subsidize the garage and park. I don't know that any of the schemes necessarily pay for themselves, if that's the question.
Yeah, and the point of my question is to make an observation that I would hope that the committee and the planning board and select board, looking over their shoulder, don't get wedded to the idea that if everybody winds up loving one of these schemes or some hybrid of these schemes, I hope people don't get wedded to the idea that, oh, we can only do it if it pays for itself. It won't pay for itself. And this is such a significant resource for the town. When you've got significantly more than half of your survey respondents saying, either it's okay to add uses here, even at the cost of reducing parking, which I don't think is a good idea. Or was it about half the respondents, Zach, that said, hey, I think looking at other uses is a great idea as long as you don't lose parking. When you've got that kind of support for treating this as a multi-purpose resource, associated development can help pay for it. Maybe some value capture model, that isn't strictly limited to the site, can help pay for it. But I don't think it should be viewed through the lens of, if we don't have a funding plan for this today, we should forget about it and just make the parking lot nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Al.
Oh, I'm sorry, can I add, sorry, one more thing. Looking at the criterion that it not require the redevelopment of the frontage buildings, that's fine. But on the flip side, this should be designed in a way and maybe sized in such a way, although I would hope the frontage buildings on Harvard Street wouldn't need much parking, that, to the degree that it's relevant, that it could facilitate that future and separate redevelopment. Those buildings should never have to worry about, oh, gee, I need, X parking spaces. Where am I going to put them? When any of these schemes assume the town is building a garage right behind those buildings.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thanks, Al. Mark.
Yeah. So my thoughts on looking at this is I think this wants to be a combination of parking and open space. I don't believe the retail back there. I don't think it works. It's buried, it's hidden. Unless you radically reposition all the retail that's on the streets, they each have to have 2 front doors with no loading. I think it's problematic to think about that. So if we just talk about parking, for example, can you go to, I guess even option 5, a couple variations that might work. If you just go 1 level down, right? You don't have to go 3, right? And I think that starts to be, much less cost prohibitive. And at least you get the entire footprint, at least you get the green space. The other thing you can think about too, if you go to option 3, is, you can also start to play with, do you go half a level down, right? And then maybe 1 level up or 2 levels up? Because right now, a 5-story parking garage back there is pretty overbearing, right? So and maybe it's a little bit bigger, but you go a little bit half down, and just to start to take the edge off and some of the cost issues. Is it 1 level down or just a half level down? I do agree with Alan. I just think the colonnade is just going to be a dark gray, unpleasant space, and it's just concrete. I don't know how you just spend a lot of money, energy, and time making that a pleasant space, and it's just going to be an uphill battle. You can do it, but by the time you've spent all that money making it this like killer, interesting space, may as well just build a new building or something. But anyways, those are my kind of points about just making parking usable. I'm dubious on retail, and just maybe thinking about you do half down and a couple up. So
thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Ken.
I would be a strong advocate for keeping the focus of our commercial districts on Beacon Street and Harvard Street, and not try to create a pull to the back areas. This has a very functional aspect to it. I think the Grove option, frankly, is something that would be could be very attractive, where you make the whole experience of visiting Coolidge Corner and all the shops and restaurants and theater and bookstores and everything that most communities would kill to have. And to protect those, I also would be very concerned about any of these major construction projects that could take 2 to 3 years, what that could do to something like the independent bookstore, or how it could impact the attendance at the Coolidge Corner Theater and other places. So we have a great commercial district. We have really good bones in terms of structure. You pointed out the multiple walking paths from this lot to the frontages, and that's something I'd like to make sure we value and protect.
Thank you, Ken. And certainly the construction is certainly something that we're mindful of in option 5 in particular, and just the impact that could be caused to the neighborhood. So I appreciate your raising that, Ken.
George.
I want to support what Mark and Ken have just said. This is a great analysis, and it really is eye-opening. But to depend on the idea of retail in this location with low visibility and new expensive space competing with old, less expensive space for retail tenants, I think is just unrealistic, which means you will not have an activated ground floor And that really changes the whole concept of development in this area. And I agree 100% with Ken that we should focus on supporting our merchants, our very successful merchants on Beacon Street and Harvard Street, and not provide them with additional competition. So I think that ultimately you're going to end up with an improved surface lot, as hard as it is for the developer and me to admit that.
There are a couple of people on the committee who will be very, I mean, they've said if they're spending all this time and energy and that's what we end up with, they're going to be very unhappy, but that's them.
Unhappy developers are not the worst thing in the world.
They're not developers, some of them. Anyway, Tom.
Yeah, I want to further endorse the points that Mark and Ken made. I think it's great to be ambitious and try to come up with something that will be a major change, but I think we need to look more realistically, and even if the committee's not happy with it, I think we need to very carefully explain the pros and cons of each of these in a very realistic way.
Okay, well, hopefully that's what Spec Dempsey is spending time doing as they evaluate these options. Anybody else? George, is your hand up again? No. Anybody else have any thoughts? Well, thank you. Thanks, Zach. This has been interesting work.
Yeah, thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know we went a little over.
And yeah, Jeff Speck is doing that talk on the 10th of September, so hopefully everybody can come.
Yeah, Wednesday, September 10th at 7 p.m.
At 7 at the Coolidge.
At the Coolidge.
So that hopefully everybody saw the staff memo updates on a variety of other things. We didn't think we had time to go through them all, which we don't. If you've seen them, great. If you have any questions, check with the staff. If you haven't seen them, please look. But there's a lot of stuff going on. And we didn't even talk about Chestnut Hill today, which is fine. And Lily just put up a question. I guess she can't, EDAB's been talking a lot about making permits and licensing processes easier for business. Is the town staff doing additional outreach on this new state resource? This is the business front door announcement, which was in the package that was sent out. Is the town staff doing additional outreach on this new state resource, and is it being brought into our ongoing conversation around a one-stop town small business resource? Are there any other updates, are there any updates on the initiative out of the town's admin's office? If not, could that be provided at our next meeting? Does anybody?
I would say just very quickly, there are no updates on the business licensing and streamlining process that I know of. And then the state's business front door initiative, they're rolling it out. I think our impression based on sort of the initial webinars and conversations with the state is that the state's still figuring things out just within the state bureaucracy. It has been flagged by many municipalities. How are they integrating these new changes and trying to streamline things at the state level with communication with the municipalities? And we don't have any good answers to that at this point. So we'll definitely keep tabs on it. But at this point, the municipalities are not integrated into the state's business front door initiative.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? Okay, well, thanks for staying on. And this has been a great meeting. And everybody have a great rest of the summer, and we'll see you on September 8th, a week after Labor Day. And then again, we're planning at this point on having a meeting, our October meeting on September 29th. At which time I don't know whether there are any other warrant articles that we're likely going to want to hear, but we will figure that out. We'll talk about that on September 8th, whatever I just said. Okay. Night, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Good night, thanks.
Everybody.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank
See
you.
y'all.